Hello everyone, and welcome to this Maker Plus tutorial. My name is Leighton, and today I'm going to be showing you how to create a wavy flag within the software. Now, there are numerous ways to do this, and what I have seen is a lot of people generating a grayscale within Photoshop and then importing it into their software to generate the 3D side of this, or the wavy effect of this. So if I open up Photoshop down the bottom here, this is the type of thing that they would do. And you would just literally create this wave like so. When you save that out and import it into Carveco or any other numerous software, what this would do, it would generate a height map, and the darker areas would sort of be indented into the relief. I'm not going to do it this way. There are numerous videos online showing how to import grayscales into the software. What I'm going to do is show you how to edit relief clip art that's already available within the software, and we're going to sculpt this ourselves. So if I close Photoshop, and then this takes us back to Maker Plus. So what I'm first of all going to do is create a new model. So let's select new model, and it asks me to set up my job. Let's say that it's 4 foot by 2 foot, and I'll set my origin to be the bottom left-hand corner. I'll work in inches for this tutorial and then select OK. Okay, so that's taken me into the Maker Plus interface, and it's placed me within the 3D view. So to generate this wavy effect, what I'm going to do is bring in a piece of clip art. So let's open up the relief clip art library, which is here. Select there, and you can see that I'm already within the bases section. Okay, so if you want to use any of these clip art, just click anywhere on the drop down and you can choose what you would like. Now, if you click reliefs, this will show you all of the reliefs within the library. Okay, so I'm going to go back up to bases, and I'm not really fussed which base I use. I want something that's maybe a little bit square because I basically want to generate a height for this. Okay, so let's import this sine base 28. So just drag and drop it in there. Now, what I can do is move that to somewhere over the top left corner there. And then let's bring that down. So if I select the bottom right, it will move down and maintain the aspect ratio. Now what I want to do is skew it and make it wider. So I can do that by selecting the red dot on the right-hand side and then just bring that out. Now, I'm not really fussed about where this actually goes to because I'm going to cut it out afterwards. I'll show you how you can do that. Okay, let's close the relief clip art library. And then if I middle mouse button, press it down and hold it and move, I can rotate the 3D view. So as I rotate it, I can see in the middle that I've got this red arrow. Now, what this red arrow does, it allows me to bring the relief up or down. So it allows me to scale it. Now, I could do that, or I could come over to the Z range on the right-hand side and just give it a height. So let's say that I want this to be 1 inch high and select apply. When I'm happy with that, I can either press enter on the keyboard or I can press paste. Okay, and that will paste that down. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is generate this wavy effect. Now, what I like to do with this is to use the sculpting tools to do this, because it gives a much more natural sort of flow to it. So if I click here for smooth, this opens up the sculpting tool. And what I want to do is use the erase tool. Now, make sure that under behavior, the mode is set to erase to base plane. Okay. If you don't have that and it's set to erase to snapshot, when you do try to actually erase anything, it won't do anything. Okay. So make sure that that is erased to base plane. And the radius, obviously, if I set that quite low, you see how I have this little shadow following me around. Make it quite high and have a larger shadow following me around. Okay, so if I set the strength to be really high and start moving over this, you can see that what it's doing, it's erasing parts of the relief. Okay, now obviously I don't really want it to be that drastic. So what I can do is select revert down the bottom here, and it will go back to how it was. Or I could just undo it. Okay, so let's have that radius looks okay. Let's bring the strength down so it only really affects it a little bit. So see if it's just taking a little bit off there. And then what I can start doing is just running over this flag. Okay, and you can see that it's created this sort of wavy effect. Now, if you want different types of waves within this, you can just change the radius, maybe adjust the strength a little bit, and then you could start doing that. Now, if this looks a little bit too drastic at the moment, what you can do is then go back to smooth, and then you can start smoothing this out. Let's adjust the strength to 100. You can see it's starting to blend into what was already there. Now, obviously, this is a bit more artistic than just creating shapes and machining them. So now what I can do is go back to erase, maybe set the strength quite low. Let's maybe follow that there. Like so. Now this is entirely up to you. You can do it however you want to. And then maybe smooth it off again. Now there's also a global smoothing. So if you wanted to, if you brought something in as an image, then what you can do is just do the global smoothing over the whole thing. The icon for that is up here. Okay, so just do the whole thing. So let me just smooth this out a little bit. Let's say like so. You could keep on rotating it and see what it looks like if you wanted to. Okay, so that looks okay. So I'll leave it there. Now, let's say that I wasn't happy with this and I wanted to carry on doing stuff. What I could do is take what we call the snapshot. So if I do a snapshot here, this takes a snapshot in time. So let's say that I'll go back to the erase tool and I happen to go a bit crazy with it. And I do it wrong. And I've let go of the mouse button, do another bit here, another bit here, another bit here. Now, if I were to undo this, it would take me back through each step. But because I have a snapshot, if I click revert, it will go back to the snapshot that I created. And it takes me back to where I created that snapshot. So when you've done something and you think that it looks pretty good, take a snapshot of it. And then if you mess it up, something goes wrong, you can always revert back to that snapshot. Okay, so that was just a brief explanation of sculpting. So let's close that. And what I'm going to do now is to trim this off. So let's give it a size that I actually want this piece to be. So let's take a view from the top, and I'm going to draw a rectangle. So let's say that this is going to be, let's say 20 inches by, let's say 40. Do it the opposite way around, or I could just rotate it 90 degrees and then select create. So that's got my rectangle, 20 inches by 40. Press F9 on the keyboard and that will center that in the model. Now what I can do is trim off the outside of this that I don't want. So to do that, if you come up to here, you've got something called zero inside vector. So if I press that, what that will do, it will basically trim off whatever's inside that vector. Obviously, I don't want that, so I'll undo that. And if you hold the left mouse button down over it, you'll get a flyout menu. And then it says zero outside vector, which is what I want for this particular example. So if I click that, you can see that it's zeroed or removed all of the material on the outside. So I just find this a little bit more artistic than bringing in an image and then just smoothing it. With this, you can have lots of different folds and you can start to play around with the sculpting tools. Right, now if I take a look on the right hand side, and you can see the relief, you can see max Z is pretty much ½ an inch. So I want this to be 1 inch high. So let's scale it. So if I click here to scale the relief, what this will do, it will give me this red button. And what I can do is just grab that and bring that up or down like so. Or I can enter a height as before. So let's make that 1 inch and select apply. And then once you've selected apply, it will automatically add onto the top of that. So you need to select cancel. And then if you take another look on the right hand side, you can see that the maximum Z is 1 inch. Okay, so that's given us the relief for the flag. What we need to do now is generate vectors for the detail of the flag. So this is just going to be a USA flag, and I'm going to import an image, create vectors for it, and then I'll show you how you can put this on top of this flag. Right, so what I'm going to do is to select Bitmaps here, and then right click, and then you've got the option to import a bitmap or an image. So if I select import, and then let's come down to wavy flag, and you can see that I've got this flag of the US. It's an SVG file. So select open. And at first glance, this looks as though it hasn't opened. But the reason that I know that it has opened is because if you take a look down the bottom, I've got all these different shades of blue in the color palette. So if I click the arrow down, you can see I've got all these different colors now, which I didn't have before. If I open up the bitmaps, you can see that I've got this flag of the United States. Now, to display that in the 3D view, what you need to do is here, it says display material. If I click on that, hold it down, you'll see under the flyout, I've got display bitmap. So this actually displays it in the 3D view. Okay, so that's actually showing you within the 3D view. Now, what you could do with this is if you wanted to send it to someone so they could see it when it was actually finished, you could bring this picture in at the right size and then overlay this on top of the relief. And then you could send it to someone and you could see what it actually looks like when it's finished. What I'm going to do is I'm going to generate some vectors for this now, and I'm going to machine it. So I'll do this in the 2D view so we don't get confused with the relief. So if I go back to the 2D view, but first of all, I'm going to display the material again. So go to the 2D view. And you can see what's happened here is that the star at the top has been chopped out. Now, the reason for this is because when I imported it, I didn't scale it. So I'm going to import it again. So let's just delete this. Import, select that. And you can see down the bottom here, I've got this scaling. And at the moment, I've got none. So it's just going to bring in the picture, okay, and not worry about what size it is. So if I select to fit, it will make sure that it fits within this piece. So if I select open, you can see what this has done. It fits within this area now, and I'm not losing the top of the stars. So let's quickly generate a bitmap to vector with this. So if I go to bitmap to vector, what this does, it just traces around this image. Now, what you need to do is make sure that you reduce the colors, because if I don't, at the moment, it's using the secondary color, which is this shade of blue on the color palette. So if I create the vectors for this, and then if I turn off the bitmap there, you can see that it's not really created any vectors. There are going to be some vectors there, but they're so small that I can't see them. So if I turn the bitmap back on and reduce the colors, I'll just move that out the way. So this has automatically reduced this down to 32 colors. So let's bring that down and let's see what we get. Now, you see here, what's happened here is the outside has blended into the red part. And I don't particularly want that because I want to create lines between the red bit. So if I bring color back into it, like so, and then select apply, you can see that that is clearly a different color to that. So there's two different shades of red. So I need to just make sure that I remember that in the color palette. Now you'll also notice that there are also two different shades of blue. So what I'm going to do is turn the lighter blue into the same color as the darker blue. And I can do that by left clicking the dark blue, so it's the primary color, and then right clicking the lighter blue, and then it's the secondary color. And then if I click this little chain at the top, what this will do, it will link them together and it will make the lighter blue the same color as the darker blue. So if I click it, you can see that it now has a line going between both of them and it's changed the color of that lighter blue. Okay, so let's create some vectors. So let's first of all create the vector around the dark blue color. So I'll just leave the speckle size and smoothness as it is. I'll be completely honest, 99% of the time, that's absolutely fine. So create vectors. And you can see that that's generated all of those stars. and also the outside of the blue. So let's now select the red. So left click on the darker red and make sure that you've got color, not secondary, primary. So it changes to red. And then create vectors. Okay, so let's turn off that image. And you can see that it's generated all of those vectors for me. Now, I don't really want that rectangle, so I'll delete that. And you can see that I've got all of my vectors. So let's go back to the 3D view now. And I need to make this the right size to fit onto the relief. So if I go to the 3D view, you can see the vectors in the 3D view, and I need to resize this to the size that the flag was. Now, I'm not too sure what the size was. Now, if I go to transform, and let's change the width to be 40, and you can see that the height has changed to 21. Now, I'm positive that the height was 20. So what I need to do is change the aspect ratio. So I need to turn this lock off. So click on it and it will turn the aspect ratio off. And then I can change that to 20 and then select apply. Now if I press F9 just to make sure that that's in the center, like so. And maybe make this just a little bit smaller because I'm going to get a little cusp on the edge here where the ball nose that I'm using isn't going to get down there properly. It's going to create basically a sharp edge. So if I make it just a little bit smaller, let's say 39.5. And the height, let's say 19.5. Okay, and then I can just come out of that. Okay, so that's all done. And I could just chop that. If this was a problem where I've got this here, if I wanted to, afterwards at the end, I could just chop that off. I'll show you how to do that. Okay. So to do that, just create a rectangle like so. Give it a width of 39.5, a height of 19.5. Create, place that in the center. Okay, so this is what I'm going to use just to cut the part out at the end. Now I'm just going to move this onto a different vector layer just so it's not in the way at the moment. So right click on it, move vectors to new layer. And then if I open up the vector layers, you can see that I've got vector layer 2. So I'll just change the color of that just so we know what that is. And I'm just going to turn that off by selecting the light bulb. Okay, and you can't see that anymore. Okay, so let's start machining this. So let's turn off the vectors for the time being. So toggle vector visibility, just turns them off. And I'll rotate around. Select Toolpaths. And what I'm going to do is create a machine relief toolpath. So this is just to machine a 3D piece. So machine relief toolpath, select there. I'll just do this over the whole of the relief. You could just draw a box around this, or you could use an automatic boundary. I wouldn't particularly use automatic boundary because it takes a little bit longer to calculate. So I would probably draw a box around it and then use selected vectors. I'm not too fussed about this, so I'm just going to do the whole of the relief. Finishing options, let's go and let's use, let's try a 1/2 inch ball nose, or let's say a 1/4 inch ball nose because they're more accessible. So click select, And roughing options, let's use the largest one that I have, which is 1/2 inch. Now, this will probably only really go around the edge here, maybe into a few of these areas, depending on where it can go. Select the step down. Let's give this a step down of, let's say 1/4 inch. So it's going to step down in 1/4 inch cuts. Okay, and I'm just going to select to define the material. So it's 1 inch thick. The material Z0 dependent on your CNC. So it could be at the top or at the bottom if you set your 0 to be at the machine bed. Now the model positioning material is different because what this does, it places this model within this block. So let's say, for instance, I had a material thickness. The material that I wanted to machine was actually 1.5 inches. And my model position in the material is at the top. So what's going to happen is I'm going to have 0.5 material on the bottom. So if I select OK for that and rotate it around, let's take a view from the side. You can see it's moved this model to be at the top of this material block, and I've got 1/2 inch at the bottom. If I were to do it the opposite way and move the model position to be at the bottom, take a look at the side again, what's going to happen, it's going to remove 1/2 inch from the top and then start machining my piece. Okay, so that's how you set up your material. So I'm going to do this at the top there, but I'm only going to do it 1 inch thick anyway. So select OK. That's set up my material block, and I'm just going to calculate that. So that's the roughing, and that's all of the areas where that 1/2 inch can get into. And then it's doing the finishing pass. Now, all of these light blue bits that you can see here and the darker blue are where the machine's moving. The light blue is where it's coming up and it's plunging back down. Now, obviously, I probably don't want that many. I want to make it a bit more streamlined. So let's just take a look at it first of all. So if I close that and open up the Toolpaths, open up the machine relief, and then let's simulate the roughing. I'll use the control bar for this so you can see it. Okay, so this is what the roughing is going to do. It's just going to take all this material out. I've set it up to do 1/4 inch cuts. Okay, so that's removed a lot of the material. And then if I simulate the ball nose, the finishing, this is just going back and forth. So it's coming over in X and stepping over in Y and so on. This is called a raster toolpath. So if I fast forward that so you can see it. So you get the general gist of it. Now, if you don't want to wait for a toolpath and you just want to see it, don't use the simulation control bar. If I close that, just right click and simulate toolpath, it will just do it really fast. Okay, so that looks quite good. So if I wanted to edit this, let's say that the finish that I was getting on here, let's make it not as good. So double click the machine relief, select the ball nose, and you can see that it's stepping over by 25 thou. Okay, let's say that I wanted this to step over by 1/8 of an inch, and then calculate that. And let's see what this looks like. Now you have to maintain a balance between a good finish and machining time. So if you want a really good finish, it's going to take you longer to machine. If you don't mind having a rougher finish, it's going to machine faster. And this is all to do with the step over. So if I reset that simulation, right click on the machine relief, and I'll just simulate the whole of the machine relief. And you can see what's happened now is I've got all these steps in there. And what's happening is this is basically the cusp of the ball nose. So because it's rounded, it's only actually machining on that tip. Okay. So let's double click on the machine relief again. And rather than use a raster, let's use a spiral and see what happens there. Now, spirals tend to give a much better finish, to be completely honest with you. But what's happening here is if I turn the roughing off, you can see it's only doing it until it reaches the edge of the model. Okay, so that's how a spiral works. If you wanted the spiral to use within this particular example, what you would need to do is use spiral in a box and select calculate. Now, the only downside with this is that you will get a lot of jumps where it touches the edges. Okay, so if I delete that simulation, let's simulate again. You can see that this is spiraling from the inside outwards. Okay, now I would just advise you to just play around with these and see what you feel is the best finish for your particular job. Most of the time I would use personally spiral, but sometimes you need to use raster. Maybe in this example, because it's quite a rectangular shape, it's good to use a raster. So let's change the step over again. The original step over was quite good, to be completely fair. So let's do it at 25 fair. Calculate now. Now, if you wanted to, you could change the roughing, so you could change the step down on there if you wanted to speed things up. Entirely up to you. So let's close that now, and let's do a simulation of this. Okay, so that looks okay. So that's given us the 3D effect, the wavy flag texture. So let's create the detail on the flag now. Okay, so let's turn on the vectors. I can do this with the simulation on, doesn't make any difference. Turn on the vectors, and you can see that I've got these vectors. Right, so what I'm going to do now is just do a pocket, okay? So just a 2D toolpath. So select all of these vectors, and then go to Toolpaths, and go to Area Clearance. Okay, finish depth, entirely up to you, whatever you want. Let's say, I don't know, let's say 1/4 of an inch. And let's add a tool to this. Maybe let's add, now what you could do is do this with an end mill, but what you have to make sure is, because what we're going to do, we're going to project this onto the model. even though we're doing a 2D toolpath, it's actually a 3D toolpath. It will be a 3D toolpath because we're going to project it. So you need to sort of think in the future. So what you need to do is use a ball nose for this, okay? What you would do if you were finishing on a 3D piece. So let's rough it out using a 1/2 inch ball nose. Now you can see the step down is 0.1. Let's maybe do that so it's 1/8 of an inch, so it does it in 2 passes. Let's change the strategy to be offset. So rather than just coming across like it was just doing as a raster and then stepping over, this will actually offset the shape and then step over inside it. Let's add a new tool. And this one's going to be a bit smaller, so it will get into all of the fine detail. So let's say, for instance, on the stars. So let's use 1/8 of an inch for this, so it gets right in there. And click select. Step down, entirely up to you. Maybe let's do this, let's say 0.1 for this. Again, I'll do an offset for this and then select calculate now. Okay, so if I delete the simulation and let's turn off these 2D previews and then rotate around and take a look from there. Now you can see that this is just a 2D toolpath, so it's just going down by a 1/4 of an inch, okay? And it's not going to go over the top of this flag. You can see here that all of these lines or this toolpath, it's all straight. If it was going over the flag, it would definitely come down a bit more here, or any of the recesses, it would come down more. So what I'm going to do is just rename this area clearance, and I'll just call this detail, just so I know what this is. And what we're going to do is project this down onto the 3D relief. Now, what I would strongly advise doing is when you get to this part is to save. The reason being is that once you do this, because toolpaths, you can't undo them. You can only edit them. But when you project things, you can project it, and if it doesn't work properly, you can't undo it. So what I would strongly advise is that when you get to this state, definitely save it. Okay, so let's save this model. And I'm going to call it wavy flag and save. Okay, so to project this onto the flag that I've created, you need to make sure that you've got a machine relief above what you've created. And then if you select this detail, then the bottom here, you've got something called transform toolpaths. So if I click on that, this allows you to transform various toolpaths. Now, for this example, don't worry about the rotation center or the positioning. This allows you to move toolpaths around. Okay, so don't worry about that. What we are going to worry about is down the bottom. You've got drop tool and project tool. Now the drop tool, that will basically drop the tool down, and wherever the tool hits, that will be where the toolpath is going to stop. Okay, so here you can see on this really small icon that the radius of the tool, when it touches the radius of the tool, that's where that toolpath will stop. What I like to use is project tool. And what that does, it will go to the tip. So it will be the center on a ball nose. That will be where it will drop down to. Now, it's a little bit hard to explain. If there's anything within the software that you're not quite sure about, a little tip if you go to help and then go to reference help, and let me just open this up. And you can see here, this has got pretty much everything within the software. So if I go to index and I want to take a look at transforming toolpaths, let's say that I'm not quite sure what it actually does. So if I go to Toolpaths, transforming toolpaths, double click on there, and it will tell me exactly what this dialog box actually means. Okay, so if there's anything that you're not sure about, I would recommend taking a look at the reference help, and it will more than likely explain what's wrong or what you need to do in there. Right, so project onto relief. Now, if you keep an eye on this, let's say there, you can see here I've got this drop or this fold in the relief. So if I click project on relief, you'll notice that this toolpath will change. So see how it's now wavy. So what this is doing is the toolpath is following the relief. Okay. So if I now close that, and now we take a look at this, you can see that the toolpaths are not all going straight, they're following the relief. So if I simulate that toolpath, like so, so that's what we had before. And then let's simulate this toolpath. Then it drops it on there. Now what I've done, I've made a deliberate mistake, because when you do drop these down, if you use more than one tool, obviously because the ball on the tool is different, you will get a different projection. Okay, so if I zoom in, let's say here, you can see that this is taking out a little bit more than what's needed. So as I said before, you can't undo this. So what I'm going to do is just open this back up again. So if I go down to recent files, go to wavy flag, let's open up my toolpaths. Here you can see my detail. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the 1/2 inch. Okay, maybe remove the 1/8 inch, and let's just use a 1/4 inch. Okay, do it as an offset and calculate. Okay, so that looks okay. And now what I'm going to do is, if I just simulate that, let's just take a look at that. So you can see that it's going in there. Okay, so one problem that I've got is that these stars don't seem to be very crisp. That's because I'm using too big a tool. So what I'm going to do is delete this simulation, and I don't really want to use a small tool just to do these pockets here. So let's turn off that blue outside vector. I'm going to select these rectangles to machine. Let's double click on the detail, select those rectangles again. So I'm going to do the rectangles separately, and I'm going to remove that, and I'm going to, let's use, and I'm going to use the 1/4 inch again, and I'm going to come down and calculate this. So it just does it over those stripes. So if I simulate that, you can see that it's just doing those stripes. Okay, and now I'm going to use another tool that's going to do the smaller stars. So if I select the stars, go to Toolpaths, do exactly the same thing, finish depth, let's say 0.25, add a tool, let's use let's say 1/8 of an inch for this. Offset, calculate, and let's see what these look like. Okay, so that looks better. Okay. Now what we need to do is project these down onto that relief. So if I delete the simulation, the first one, let's call that actually stripes, and let's call this one stars, just so I don't get mixed up. Let's select stripes, and I'm going to turn on the toolpaths just so I can see them, make sure that they are projected. So stripes, going to go to transform toolpaths, project tool, and then project onto the relief. Okay, go to stars and then project that onto the relief. Okay, you just saw a slight dip there where it went down. Okay, so this should be almost finished now. So if I simulate the machine relief, simulate the stripes, and then simulate stars. Okay, so that's dropped all of those on there. Now, if you did have the bitmap at the right size when it came in, you could turn that on and then drop the bitmap over the top of there, like so. And you could see exactly how it was going to be. Okay. So what we need to do now is, let's say I don't really want this edge here. Not really too keen on that. So I'll just show you how you could cut that out. So if I turn on the vectors again, select the outside blue vector, and then what I'm going to do is just do a simple profile around the edge. So make sure that I've got outside, finish depth 1 inch, profiling tool, let's use a 1/2 inch end mill, and then select calculate. And then if I simulate that, okay, you can see that it's cut the part out and it's not left me with those areas. Now I may need to bring that in just a touch more because I've still got the radius on the ball nose. But what I'm going to do is just delete the waste material. And I'm going to keep the pick material and select there. And there you can see my finished wavy flag. All that I need to do now is save the toolpaths and then send them to my CNC machine. So I hope that you found this useful. I hope that it gave you a few ideas with Carveco Maker Plus. And thank you very much for watching. Hopefully I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Goodbye.